Okay, so we can start with our first presentation. Uh, First of all, I'm not Antonio Scognamillo. There is a mistaken identity. I'm Giovanni Generale, but still, we can start with our first presentation. So when you want, you have the floor. I will sit in front of you for showing you the time.
Is everyone hearing me well? Yeah? No?
No, I don't think it's active.
Is it? Okay. So good morning, everyone. I hope that you had a great night last night and you're happy to be back this morning. So I'm Louise, and today I'm going to try to present you an European Interreg project called Reactive City. So a few things before we begin. This presentation will be a bit different than what we saw yesterday because it will be mainly about sociology and chemistry. And also we are in a parallel session called Agriculture and Development, but due to schedule difficulties, I will not talk about agriculture and not about development, but I promise you that I will try to link my subject with a bit of agriculture. So towards a city without biocides, I hear a burning question in the audience. What's biocides? So yeah, I thought you were gonna do a bit of chemistry today. Biocides are chemicals that destroy living organisms, generally used against microorganisms. So basically, pesticides are biocides. So that's our first link with agriculture. But also disinfectant that we all used in our daily life or like common life. So you have here a few examples. So yeah, you have disinfectants here, French one. But biocides are also used in paints, such as paint that we use on outdoors walls. And so you can say like, why are we talking about biocides? It's because I have in this project some colleagues that are actually chemists, and they found in groundwater some micropollutants, and they were residues of biocides. And they were wondering why and how are they here? So that's how the Reactive City project was born. So as you may guess before, it's an interdisciplinary project. I'm working with chemists, I'm taking care of the sociological part, but we're also working with lawyers, with architects, biologists, and so on. And it's also a cross-border project because it's a European Interreg project. So we are sharing our studies with university in Germany, Freiburg and Landau. So why is it relevant to speak about biocide here with you? It's because we are in a climate change adaptation context, which leads us to question our soil permeability, and we have to reconsider it in order to avoid dreadful events like flooding or drought. And our idea can be linked with the concept of sponge city, which basically means that we want to retain water into our urban soil in order to face climate change. But in order to do that, water quality is key because we cannot, we do not want bad quality water to get into our soil. So before getting a sponge city or permeable one, we want to get a better water quality. And so to better understand what I just said, we can look at biocide circulation in the urban water system. So this question is still the same. How can we think a permeable city if the urban water cycle is polluted? We identified like 4 big categories of biocides. We have here the biocides in the paintings that I was mentioning before. They are part of a previous sociological project called Navegbo. And that's also very interesting. If you have some question about it, we can discuss that later. We also have PFAS that are considered to be also biocides, and they are maybe known to you because they are newly diffused on public agenda. But today I'm going to talk about domestic biocides that are basically disinfectants, and they are my sociological focus. So why a sociological approach? It's because the Reactive City project has a very clear goal, reduction of biocides at sources in order to do that, we have to question reduction in usage. And so we have to study usage, and that's what sociologists can do. So we decided to investigate two domains, childhood care facilities, municipal building management, and we met 3 types of different actors: commercial suppliers, managers, maintenance workers. So it's basically qualitative methodology, semi-structured interviews, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes focus group discussion. And the scale, the area, is the metropolitan area of Strasbourg. I've conducted like 26 interviews. It's more than 45 people met. And I've visited 16 different facilities, so some of them multiple times. That's why I have 26 interviews. So our research question were, there were a lot actually, but today I'm going to present you some of them. How many kind of disinfection practice can we find on the sociological field? How are people willing to renounce or give up on ULS disinfection or to transition to alternatives? What are they holding them back to transition? And also a huge and interesting question that I'll try to answer: how is circulating composition and risk knowledge along the cleaning industry stakeholder chain? So first, chemistry today. What kind of disinfection practice we can find? I identified like 3 main practices. The use of quaternary ammonium compounds, and you probably use them without knowing that you're using them. They are known to be very efficient because they are used in the medical field, in hospital, for example. They are also most commonly used because on the 16 facilities that I visited, 11 of them are using them unconsciously most of the time. They are not treated by sewage treatment plants. What does it mean is that our treatment plants are not designed to treat this kind of micropollutants. So they are either released in the environment where they are persistent, or they are absorbed in treatment plant solids that are often transferred to agricultural field, another link with agriculture. So yes, we have quaternary ammonium compounds in our fields. And it's also known to be toxic on ecosystem, and it increases microbial resistance. And then we can find, like the study found some other practices that we can call here alternatives. The use, for example, of lactic acid, which is also a biocide, and it's used when we have labeled disinfectant, such as Ecolabel or EcoCert. It's often unconsciously used because it's in the context of greening practices. For example, childhood care facilities, they try to take care of the product. They are aware that it might be toxic, so they choose to use eco-labeled product, and so they are using lactic acid without knowing it. And it's a natural occurring molecule. Actually, our body produces some of them. Like it's found like in many places in nature, so it's easily biodegradable. And then we have another alternative that is steamed water, which is known to be historically effective. We all may know that high temperature water disinfects. So it's only high temperature and water, no chemical residue, but it requires specific equipment and change to working practices. So the question that we ask after this observation is why quaternary ammonium compounds are still most commonly used. What is holding back the people, the adoption of alternatives? And so we found that in most, or maybe all of our interviews, that there is a persistent belief saying that a smoother chemistry is less efficient than a stronger one, than the most innovative one, such as quaternary ammonium compounds. That's why people are afraid to use lactic acid, for example, or labeled products, because they assume that it will be less efficient. And it's also a persistent belief that we can find in agriculture. And we also saw that when we were talking about adopting alternatives, they always respond in working organizations. So it may imply a change in working practices and long-time habits. but it's really relevant because all of the people we met working in the cleaning sector knew about what I didn't know before, but the senior cycle, which are the 4 conditions for an effective cleaning. 4 factors: chemical action, time application, mechanical use, and temperature. So to them, if you reduce chemical action, you will obviously increase time application or increase mechanical use, which will be a matter of work organization, because for the people we met, cleaning practices, disinfection practices are never about chemistry. They're not about, sometimes about price, but they're not about ecology. They're always a matter of work organization, working hours, planning, and mechanical use. So when I met, for example, maintenance workers, they were afraid to use soft chemistry products because they will be afraid of having to work more or harder. And sometimes some facilities do not have enough money to invest in machinery. So increase of mechanical use will basically imply more human muscle action. And we can also link this reluctance to alternative to another concept, which I can explain as a paradigm of innovation through technological advancement. And it's what Goulet and Vic trying to explain in their very interesting paper here. Is that the adoption of alternative seek to innovate by withdrawal, meaning that we have to innovate to do something better. We have to do without, so give up on useless disinfection, or we have to do with less, so less chemistry, less advanced technology, such as steam water and lactic acid. And finally, I would like to share this scheme with you. It's about knowledge circulation along the cleaning stakeholder chain, and it was also for us a way of trying to understand why people were still using quaternary ammonium compounds and not alternatives. So we identified 4 types of actors, such as manufacturers, commercial suppliers, managers, maintenance workers. Manufacturers are out of our scope of observation because they refused to speak with us. And we also identify 5 types of knowledge, such as use knowledge, which is basically how do you know how to clean a place, like practices. Also function knowledge, can you make a difference between a disinfectant and a detergent? Composition knowledge, which is the knowledge that we are most interested in today, like do you know which molecule you're using? Risk knowledge, which is all about environmental toxicology, but also human toxicology. And prescription knowledge, which is only for commercial suppliers because they are responsible of editing protocols. And we also put scientific community that I represent today out of the scope of observation because the link between the two is hard to make. So what we observe is a huge loss of knowledge along the stakeholder chain. For example, we assume that manufacturers know the active molecule that they are producing and putting in products. I hope so. But then we are losing this knowledge along the chain. Sometimes commercial suppliers do have this knowledge, sometimes they don't, they already don't. And then it does not pass through the relationship that they have with managers and maintenance workers. So this loss of composition knowledge can also explain why risk knowledge does not circulate inside our actor chain. And it seems to be a problem to us because if you do not have risk knowledge, you cannot build risk awareness and fight the fact that these products are polluting our urban cycle. And so, as you saw before, the project is almost over. And the question that we are asking is how to raise risk awareness. And it can be linked to the introduction conference that we had yesterday morning, meaning that we are kind of good to talk with each other, but sometimes we have had time to talk with social society, civil society, and citizens. And so I'd be happy to discuss with you after that's Reactive City, is actually now developing a citizen platform when we are meeting with civil society, so association, and we also asked people that we met on the sociological field to come with us and discuss, and we are currently trying to transmit to them the knowledge that we have as sociologists and chemists, and we also want them to be able to build risk awareness about these micropollutants. I don't know where I am from the timing, but okay, because I'm done. So I was maybe speaking too fast, but if you have plenty of questions, I'm here to respond.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering is there any role played by local institutions in the sense that could be that legal frameworks defining how cleaning processes in specific areas should be done play a role or not?
So you mean like a political application of the project? Yeah. So we also have been working on that. As I said, I'm working with the lawyers. And so we are currently speaking about political application. We are linked with Strasbourg City. So we are talking with elected people, but also agents. And the idea is the work of one of my colleagues was to think of several scenarios to reduce biocidal use in outdoor paintings. And it was basically low reflection, low thinking, and it was also urbanistic thinking. And so she wrote several scenarios and she gave them to the city so that they can apply on what they want to. But for example, in my case, like the domestic biocides, disinfectants, actually in France, cleaning is city competence. Like they are responsible of the product they are buying. So my goal here is to talk with policy making and to just like it's very small adjustments to when they are buying products to go everywhere in the city, they can restrain it and go for labeled one, for example, if they don't want to go for clean water.
Hi. You mentioned that you're working in an interdisciplinary team. So I was wondering if there's any discussion about bringing the cost dimension into this assessment. You were mentioning at the beginning the fact that there are beliefs that lead people to use one chemical versus the other alternatives. So maybe is there any effort to estimate also what are the costs? And more importantly, who bear the costs of one versus the other so that in policy design, those costs and maybe some incentives to shift those costs to other agents may be considered.
Thank you for your question. Actually, the cost incentive was one of our first hypotheses. We were thinking that they don't want to use alternatives because it's more expensive. And it's actually not true for lactic acid. It's kind of equivalent. But the problem is here for steamed water because it needs more machinery linked to this kind of cleaning. And the cost is a question that people are asking themselves, but it's also because it implies a change of working practices and they are afraid to maybe spend like $3,000 and not be able to use it because the maintenance workers won't be able to change their practices. So they are like for everyone I met, they are not against spending money, but they are afraid that it won't be used enough. And I didn't have any calculation on the cost on the which person is bearing the cost, because I'm not an economist. But I can say that public policy is a great lever here, and it will be probably public money. Don't know if I answer your question.
So what I think is that for this kind of question, it'd be super interesting to understand, because your argument is who bears the cost of the pollution that is long-term, that is not seen, that is all consumers basically of us who end up bearing the costs, but that's not accounted for. And that's why there are probably no constraints to the use of those pollutants. So having an estimate and bringing maybe that into the multidisciplinary efforts, having an estimate of the long-term effects to inform the policy discussions that you're having, I think would be super interesting.
Yeah, that would be a great advocacy argument, actually. I will talk with my colleagues about that.
Thank you for this exciting presentation. Do you have any idea about international comparison with respect to this attitude towards the cost and the benefit of this kind of cleaning?
Because the sociological study have always just been led in the Strasbourg area, I cannot assume that it's the same in Germany. But we are trying to discuss with our German colleagues about that. But they are not really into doing the same in Freiburg, for example. They are toxicologists across the border. And so I can't really respond. I'm just guessing that because it's the European Union and biocides are chemicals that are ruled by Europe and European Commission, it's kind of the same. But I don't know if I don't know, maybe we can guess that German people are more into greening practices. I don't know, we have to check. But like our colleague across the border do not conduct the same kind of studies, so I don't know.
And there is no literature on international comparison?
Not really. Like the literature is actually focusing on the toxicology of the quaternary ammonium compounds. So there's a lot of toxicologists working on the subject, but not really sociologists for now, but maybe will be. If it's okay for you, we can move on. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I have a quite loud voice. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much for being here for our first session. And let me thank Louise for a very interesting presentation. And I also have to apologize because my slides are very much boring in format with respect to Louise's ones. So that's the scene of empirical economist in this case. So we are very, very much boring in slides formatting with respect to other disciplines. So I hope you will bear with me. Okay, so today I'm going to present you a work co-authored with colleagues from different institutions. It's co-authored with Andrea Mazzitelli, Wolfgang Stoyens, Carlo Azzarri, Ergin Main, and Tilman Brook. And the title is quite long. It's actually a follow-up work I'm going to explain to you in a second. And it's named Polycrisis in Agri-Food Systems, Climate Conflict, Interactions, Labor Intensity, and Spatial Temporal Spillover in 21 African countries. Okay, so the roadmap of what I'm going to discuss to you today. So we will see the motivation. I'm going to try to explain to you the dataset construction, and I'm going to try to explain to you why we use machine learning work in this follow-up study. And we use a structural spatial temporal neural network. We will see the results, and I will try to give you some policy implications of this. Okay, so the motivation behind these works lies on the fact that climate shocks and violent conflict increasingly overlap in low and middle-income countries. So the key question here is not only whether climate shocks reduce labor intensity, but whether the reduction is stronger when climate shocks occur in areas already exposed to conflict. So this is a polycrisis question because the combined effect may exceed the sum of the two separate crises. So labor intensity is a particularly relevant outcome because work hours capture short-run economic adjustment. Okay, so I'm trying to leave a little bit more explanation on this. Because we consider weekly hours work by respondents quickly to shocks. So basically, we actually see that working hours change rapidly after shocks. And agricultural work, so we have two types of labor intensity. So we consider agricultural work and non-agricultural work. So agricultural work is directly exposed to heat, floods, droughts, and insecurity, while non-agricultural work captures alternative adjustment mechanism. So the central empirical idea here is that climate shocks may have different labor market effects depending on whether individuals live in a conflict-related local environment, especially with conflict occur before the climate event. Okay, so basically we move from local shocks to a regional polycrisis. So that's actually the turning point of these studies. Because in our first studies that actually was presented here at this conference last September by Ergin and Carlo, so in our first studies, we estimate the average interaction between climate events and conflict exposures on individuals' level labor data. But what we see is that actually the neighboring districts may share agricultural system, labor market, roads, acting or pastoral corridors. So these actually create a second question. And the second question is, do local climate conflict interactions propagate spatially and temporally? So it's not only about the momentum, it's also about how these spreads out both spatially and temporally. Okay, so our research design, I'm just to try to be very quick on this. So we have harmonized labor force and household survey data on 21 African countries. We have individual level weekly hours worked, and also we have some exposure measures. So we have climate events, we also have conflict events, and then we have these exposure windows that we consider. So we consider climate events in the 6 months before the interview, and we consider conflict over 12 months and split into 0, 6, and 6, 12 months. Okay, so the countries and data coverage, as you can see, we have several countries, so we cover most of Sub-Saharan Africa, but not only. So most surveys were collected between 2013 and 2019, with a small number of early survey years. So the spatial matching, so this is actually very important, is performed at the lowest available administrative area. So we don't have geospatial location by the individual, but we do know where the individual is located within the administrative unit. So we take the lowest available administrative division provided by the survey. So this is not just let's say a technical operation, this will be a substantial methodological step. So the baseline econometric model that we take from the first study is that we have a dependent variable, which is actually the log weekly hours worked by the individual in location C at time t, and then we have climate that captures the recent exposure to the extreme climate events. We have conflict that capture recent local exposure to conflict. And then we have interaction terms. Okay, so what the original fixed effect models gives us, so we have a lot of strengths from the, let's say, the basic fixed effect, panel fixed effect model. So we do have interpretable coefficients, we do have clear interaction terms, and we also are able to control for country and year effects. But there is a strong limitation to this, unfortunately, that we do not see average marginal effects dominant, and we don't see the spatial spillover, which are not directly modeled, but we also do not see the nonlinearity, the curvature in this relationship. Also, we're not able to consider this, prior exposure and spatial diffusion, which can be confounded if only local variables are used. So why do we move to machine learning? I hope I convince you a little bit of the reasoning why. So it's not because we don't like fixed effects or because we believe that fixed effects are wrong. So the fixed effect model try to answer the casual average interaction question, but we're actually asking a different question here. And the questions we are going to ask, it's whether if climate conflict labor disruptions are spatially connected, and whether they form corridors, and whether temporal exposure changes this spatial pattern. So there are two things happening. It's not only the spatial correlation, it's also time that is changing this. Okay, so the problem with standard spatial econometrics in this setting is that classical stars, or the spatial autoregressive model and dynamic spatial panels usually require the dependent variable to be defined at the same level of the spatial weights. So let me remind you that our y variable, it's at the individual level, and then we have the spatial weights that actually are not at the individual level. It's the lowest administrative level. So in this paper, basically, what we are trying to do is to find a solution to this issue, because classical spatial econometrics impose us to be exactly everything, to put everything at the same level. So we can borrow something from spatial econometrics for sure. So we will definitely borrow the separation that we do have in contemporary spatial context, the temporal memory that is recorded in classical spatial econometrics, and the delayed spatial diffusions. So the structure here comes from classical spatial econometrics. But we actually have to adjust this with machine learning, because machine learning allows us to approximate nonlinear relationships that are difficult to be imposed parametrically. Also, it allows the spatial effects to vary across regions rather than focusing just on a single homogeneous spillover coefficients. Also, we can see thresholds, and we can see interactions, and we can see heterogeneous spatial patterns. So these also can be evaluated out of sample, and these can help us to generalize our results. So the main conclusion here is that we impose an econometrics lag structure inside a flexible predictive architecture. Okay, so basically this is the sum up of our methodological setting. So basically we have a joint nonlinear representation of what is happening. We do have the macro covariates, the stays there, we're not changing them. We do have the spatial lags, and also we do have these temporal spatial components. Okay, so this is not a generic neural network. So those of you that are into machine learning might see this as a generic neural network analysis. So this is not, because in generic neural network analysis, what we have, in very simple terms, I'm simplifying here, is that we have an input variable, so a bunch of input variables, and we have an outcome, so our dependent variable, so we have a target. And what comes in between, it's often criticized because it's labeled as a black box. I mean, those into machine learning, know very well that actually now the literature is evolving. So actually, it will be a very negative flavor to say that it's a black box. But basically what we're trying to do here is to disentangle a little bit what is happening in between. We are actually constructing layers. So in these stories that goes from the inputs to the targets, we are adding a spatial layer, and we will be adding a spatial temporal layer. Okay, what are the premises? Why do we need to have a spatial analysis? Okay, so this is a very simple descriptive map, just showing you the conflict events and the climate events. So these two maps do not clearly overlap. As you can see, we have more climate events than conflict events, but we can see that in some areas, they can be overlapping. Also, we can see that even if they are not strictly overlapping, there can be events that are actually close to each other. So this proximity is not usually considered in standard econometrics. We cannot actually understand how proximity, closeness to other events can affect what we are living in this area at this moment. So the spatial analysis starts from the observation that climate and conflict exposures are geographically patterned, but they're not identical. Okay, so we will start with the spatial neural network. So we will start with a neural network with just one layer, that is the spatial layer. So the first machine learning specification adds a very simple addition to what we see usually. It's that we are performing exactly the same regression that we did in our first study, but adding the spatial layer. So these ask whether neighboring exposures and neighboring labor market conditions helps explaining the labor intensity beyond the local covariance. And this is the spatial only extensions. So it's capturing contemporaries' spatial dependence, but does not yet separate the persistent over time. So time is out of the scope at this point in time. Okay, so let me show you. This is the spatial layer. So this is the result. I'm not giving you the, let's say, the metrics, because those are really boring, and for the sake of time, I think it's not really intuitive, but hope you trust me on this. So the model is cross-validated, so it's, let's say, machine learning well-structured. But here what we see on the map, this is just the spatial layer. So this is the power of actually the spatial interaction that we have. We are not seeing the spatial spillover yet. Okay, what we do see, so we have two maps. Once it's if our y variable is hours works in agriculture. This one is if our y variable is hours works outside agriculture. Okay, so from agricultural work, we have the spatial activation, it's strong across West Africa and Sahelian corridors. And this pattern is consistent with regional agricultural system and climate-sensitive livelihoods. For non-agricultural works, we see clusters. So the main difference here that I want to, let's say, highlight is that we can see some corridor years. This is one, this can be another one. Here, we actually tend not to see corridor, but we do see clusterization. See, we have these observation that actually are coming together. Okay, so if we activate this, so this is not activated, this is just descriptively showing you what is the spatial legs. If we perform the neural networks, we can see the spillover. So how the activation of these layers affects these maps. As you can see, this map is becoming a little bit more colorful, so we do see the intensity of this. And again, the intensity of this is changing because we do have spillover effect, meaning that being close to other areas affected by climate or conflict events affect what is happening locally in our area. So we have agricultural spillovers, forms visible corridors, especially in agricultural, in hours work in agriculture. I mean, again, we can see the corridors here that are getting more visible with the spillover effects. So this supports the idea that climate conflict labor disruptions can travel through spatially connected agri-food system. And then we have non-agricultural spillovers that appear more localized and less corridor-alike. Okay, so what is going to happen if to this story we had the temporal aspect? So we didn't see anything about the temporal, how actually this changes across time. So this, let's say, pretty complex situation is even affected by the passing of time. So the question here is, does the spatial pattern remain exactly the same after the model explicitly accounts for this? So in the neural network, we adding another piece, and this other piece comes from time. So we do have a spatial only model, and this one is using only contemporary spatial context. In this one, we are adding the lags. Okay, so this is the spatial temporally activation layer. So this is just showing you descriptively, replicating what I showed you a few minutes ago. So this is one with only the spatial layer. This is one with the spatial temporal layer. As you can see, I mean, this is becoming stronger and stronger. Look at the corridors here, are becoming even more visible, and we haven't activated them yet. So again, what we see is that we have big corridors in West Africa and the Sahelian regions, but we do see something alike, still clustered. This cannot be perceived as a corridor because you can see we still have clusterization here for hours work outside agriculture. Okay, so I'm not wasting time and I'm gonna get straight to the spillover effects. So if we activate that layer, we do see spillover effects that are even much stronger with respect to what I showed you earlier. Surprisingly, what we do see that hours work outside agriculture, remember that in our hypothesis, our works outside agriculture are very, let's say, resistant to change. So they tend to change less rapidly with respect to hours work in agriculture, but still the spillover effect, so considering spaces time, will have an effect also on hours work outside agriculture. Okay, so what we do have that agricultural spillovers remain closely linked to the broad vulnerability corridors, especially in Sahelian and West African areas, but we do have non-agricultural spillovers that are appearing stronger in parts of East and Southern Africa and Madagascar. Okay, so what are the policy implications of this? So the policy implication of this is that agricultural labor's disruptions appears especially connected to corridors across Sahelian and West African areas, and that interventions limited to individual districts may miss this. So if we focus on target interventions that are just targeting local communities, may actually miss the fact that we do have corridors. And so regional coordination becomes very important for early warning. Okay, so what are the main takeaways? And I will conclude. So first of all, prior conflict exposure is central. So time, it's crucial. So the fact that I've been exposed to a conflict in early years affects how I'm acting now. So the climate shocks is more damaging when it strikes already conflict-affected environments. This machine learning extension is motivated by a special question. So we start by a special question. So the fact that I'm close to areas that have been affected by conflict or climate or both of them can be diffused to my area, yes or not? And if yes, why and how? But we are adding something more because we are adding also a temporal component. So this methodology that I explained to you, it was actually proposed by us in a paper for the Statistical Association conference we were going to have at the end of June. And I mean, this is just an addition to what we have in machine learning literature on neural networks. So basically what we are trying to show that it's not true that it's a black box. So what it's strongly argued against machine learning and neural networks application is that we don't see what is happening. So we're trying actually to see this, so actually decompose this gray area in, let's say, visible layer. And the two layers that we added are the spatial and temporal one. Okay, so last but not least, our conclusion is that policy responses should combine climate adaptation, conflict sensitivity, regional coordination, and demographic targeting. I hope I'm on time. I think I have 30 seconds earlier. Yes. So thank you so much for the attention, and I will be more than happy to receive questions from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tulia, for your presentation. Very interesting. I was wondering if you have exploited somehow, or if it's possible to do that, the heterogeneity about conflict events. Because, I mean, there are some countries subject to violent internal conflicts with many events, and others where protests, social unrest is much more likely. And using ACLED data, you take together all these different events. So the first question is, can you distinguish what kind of violence may drive the results that you have shown? And the second question is quite close to the first one and is about climate change. In this case, you mentioned floods, droughts. Once again, can you distinguish between different events? Because in some cases, you are talking about slowly onset of disasters, and in other cases, very sudden events. So the impacts may be different also in terms of labor intensity. So I would like to know something about the heterogeneity of these two dimensions and how they can be analyzed in your framework. Thank you.
Should we take a second question?
Perfect, thanks. Maybe just three things that I had back, or just to add to the heterogeneity. I noticed that Tunisia is always a little bit different. So I was wondering if you looked into that or did a couple of sensitivity analysis to see what happened if you exclude Tunisia from the analysis. And I was wondering if you have any sense of, or if you could look at what is the intensity or the spread of what are the spread of the effects, both spatially and temporally. You played, let's say, a little bit with the time frame in time, but I wonder if in space you could look also a little bit into that. And I'm thinking, for example, whether there are any hard barriers that are breaking or facilitating the spread of your effects. Let's say you could play with national borders, geographical barriers, things like that. Maybe you've done it already, but just to put it out. And then the other thing that I was wondering is, you mentioned at the very beginning that you aggregate at different scales because of data constraints, but that may bring going back to the modifiable or aerial unit problem, it may bring impacts on the way that you capture the spatial effects. So I was wondering, maybe if you haven't done it, whether you could do some sensitivity analysis, just breaking your sample by the levels of aggregation to see if the extent of your impacts change spatially or temporally.
Okay, so I'm going to answer to this first question, otherwise I will forget, I apologize. I have a very short memory. Okay, so to reply to Sarah's questions, so regarding the heterogeneity regarding conflict types and climate events type, so we haven't done yet, because our purpose here was actually to put everything together just to see if we do have vulnerability corridors. So if these spatial and spatial temporal dimension is existing. So the reason why we are doing this is just to see if, so most of the time we do have multiple conflict types and multiple climate events types happening across time and happening across space. So we're putting all these together just to see if there is something that makes sense spatial and temporally. Definitely, we should actually run a disaggregated analysis distinguishing between conflict types and climate events types. So definitely, this is something that we have on the records for future research. Again, this is just an extension of something that we already seen in the past conference in September. This is just comes from the fact that we were not able to see this. So we were not able to have a map like this. And to see if the results actually carry additional information coming from the fact that we do have different spaces and different time horizons in this case. So regarding Nancy's question, so first of all, it's true. We do have different effects across countries. So we do have, unfortunately, we don't have much data on North Africa. So we cannot actually see if there is the existence of corridor. We can just see if there is a spatial component, spatial temporal component. But we actually could take out some countries and see if, just analyzing by subgroup of countries changes the situation. And regarding your other questions, I will go straight to the one on the spatial weights. It's true that we do have in classical spatial econometrics this strong restriction on how things are aggregated at the spatial levels, and if we actually set different levels might affect the results. So we have been running sensitivity analysis using classical spatial econometrics, given the restrictions of this. And we actually see very similar results on this. So we actually haven't included the robustness checks, sensitivity checks that we do have. But so we do have confirmation that these also, it's confirming classical spatial econometrics when we do perform the standard rules. Here, what we are doing, we are attaching. So we are not putting things together. So in spatial econometric, the spatial component is strongly attached. So it's like if we are dressing someone. In this case, we are just giving an accessory. So we're just adding an extra layer. So we're not strongly attaching it. We are just adding this piece of information. But this can only be done in a non-casual setting, non-parametric setting, like machine learning techniques. So that's what we were doing. And I totally agree that we should perform more let's say, a better sensitivity analysis, both regarding different countries and both regarding different time frames. I hope I answered your questions. Okay. Okay, any other question?
Actually, they hear me even without the mic. Thanks. Very nice job, first of all. I think you should present the fact that you're unboxing the machine learning as one of your results at the very beginning, because you're trying to solve that issue, right? So that's also one of the things it's worthy to bring forward, because it's really insightful. I actually agreed very much with the comments you received. Also, what I like to flag is the same of fast onset and slow onset about climate events also works for some kind of getting used to conflict events and not only how intense they are, but if I get used to see fatalities, I kind of like know that this is the status where I'm living in. And there is also touch and a cultural approach. So if there is, for example, a ethnicity that has already been pushed towards like many violence, and they are really attached to the land, that is there, that there are two concepts that they go ahead together. And so both the slow onset of the events goes together with how much I'm used to conflicts. So if I'm used to kind of see fatalities, or maybe I do see very frequent social unrest, but never fatalities, and then I see fatalities, this is a break-even point eventually. Also, there is something that I think it's good to highlight in advance, is that while I can do work outside agriculture in other points, so and if I'm already in a place where people is used to move already, it's easy to move. So I think accessibility is something you could be taken account in this count, because if I'm already working outside in agriculture and the work that I put in the two things is already disproportional, and I have less land, so land ownership as well is something that comes into the game. I know it's a lot to take in account, but the cultural approach is really important, and how much I'm used to something and eventually. And the other thing I wanted to flag out, it was at the very beginning, you presented the conflict map, and Ethiopia somehow is not there. So just eventually the conflicts and to control for the special effect. I get the climate events in Ethiopia can eventually affect the downstream countries. But it's good to flag out that eventually you can have an impact from Ethiopia and people moving and impact the other countries. But yeah, to control for countries, because I think it was something as Tunisia, it flags out. Eventually to divide by areas, that could be also useful, because cultural, I'm sorry, I go back to the cultural point. The cultural point is really essential. So I would eventually distinguish, for example, between East Africa, because if you look there, you kind of have a dividing line. So I do expect that something is happening in the middle there, but you don't observe it. So you kind of fell back in the black spot thing. So maybe having East Africa and West Africa, this could also try to explode something else. But overall, like it's just because it was really, really interesting. So I will keep on asking you questions, but like very well done.
Thank you so much, Julia. I mean, I really enjoyed your comments. So regarding the unboxing the black box, so we will try to see how we come out from the Italian Statistical Conference in the end of June, where we are actually showing all these methodological part, all the technicalities of it, which I avoided to explain here because it's pretty boring. And also for time consistency, I couldn't explain. So we will try to see if we get out, we are winners of this, let's say, literature battle on unboxing the black box. So we have strong debates in the literature on this. But I'm definitely with you that we're trying to unboxing the black box, and this can be an option. So the fact that dividing layer and having, let's say, visible layer here, we are definitely trying to this let's say, unbox mission, it's coming through. The second point that you made is actually connects to something that I had in mind before. It's, let's say, the persistence, the cultural component. Also, this relates to something that we all know. It's a very, let's say, critical word, that is expectations. So expectations that people have that are reflected by cultural bias, are reflected by past events, also affects future. So here, in this case, we do have that expectation can be modeled, could be modeled by machine learning with out of sample. I mean, we're using out of sample techniques, obviously, but these also give us a frame of how predictive our results are. So is it possible to actually state out clear that we do have some vulnerability corridors in place? So whatever it happens, it will be affected by the existence of this. So machine learning techniques in this case may consider this. So this is one of the strong power of machine learning. Things that, of course, would be great to add in the data, but it's difficult to connect all this type of data at the same time for all these countries. But your point is actually, one of my, let's say, greatest food for thoughts for the next research, because these also relate to expectations, cultural bias, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much. This was actually very, very interesting to discuss and a lot of food for thoughts. And also this connects to Sarah's and Nancy's questions before. So it highly depends on actually the conflict type and the climate event type. So in the ACLED dataset, we have many conflict events. It depends on which conflicts we consider. So there is a lot of heterogeneity into this. So here we just wanted to try to state out clearly that we do have some corridors in place that are both related to space and time. So I hope that I answer all questions. I don't know if you have. Okay, Sarah, please.
Let's assume that you showed this picture without giving the background of what you have done to a policymaker, okay? Forget about the conflict, forget about climate change. Here you have a situation in which hours work outside of agriculture is increasing. What would be the policy perspective?
Sarah, I was expecting this question from you. I was actually worried you were not actually asking a question like this. No, you're totally right. A part of this fuss on machine learning application and whatsoever, here it comes clearly that we cannot have targeted solution in this case. So in scenarios of conflict, so in countries affected heavily by climate and conflict events, target solution cannot be successful because on the way in which they are positioned both in space and time. So the fact is that we need coordination policy. So we have coordination across policies, across regions, because otherwise target solution can be meaningless if we not consider the surroundings, both in space and time. So that's the main policy implication of this. Thank you, Sarah. I was actually expecting this question from you. I was worried you were not asking. Okay, so thank you so much. I will stop now and I will give the floor to Giovanni. Thank you a lot.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning to everybody. I'm Giovanni Generale, a PhD student at the University of Florence, and today we'll present you my paper that is co-authored by Professor Donato Romano and by Dr. Antonio Scognamillo from FIO. The aim of our paper is to isolate the effect of rising rice prices on the food security of paddy-producing farmers in Sri Lanka. As you know, in the last decade, and especially after the onset of the COVID-19 and the invasion of Ukraine, food price shocks have been increasingly frequent in domestic and international market, posing a significant threat to the food security of developing countries where a large share of the population depends on agriculture for both income and sustenance. In 2022, Sri Lanka was hit by the most severe economic crisis of its post-colonial history. And in September 2022, food inflation peaked, reaching its historical maximum at 95%. The crisis was due to a compounding of global value chain disruption, but also domestic policy misconduct, such as the ban on chemical fertilizer imports that was issued in April 2021, and compounding with the effect first of the COVID-19 and then of the fertilizer price spike due to the invasion of Ukraine, contributed to a plummeting in rice production with a 34% decrease with respect to 2021, and leading 30% of the population into acute food insecurity by October 2022. The crisis was especially damaging because Sri Lanka plays a crucial role, rice plays a crucial role in Sri Lanka diets and economy, involving almost 2 million farming families, and being the main staple food of the country, contributing to the 42% daily calorie intake of an average Sri Lankan. However, the crisis not only increased the price level, but also altered the functioning of the rice supply chain and the market structure. Indeed, in the first chapter of my PhD thesis, that is an integration studies, I find that in 2022, short-term market integration declined as signaled by weakened or unbounded error correction term, and the price transmission became strongly asymmetric along the supply chain, with retail prices adjusting immediately to wholesale price increases while adjusting more slowly to wholesale price decreases. Some definition for the one of you that are not fond of this literature, the error correction term represent the speed at which prices goes back to equilibrium after a short-term shock. So you can consider it as a proxy of short-term adjustment speed in the value chain, while the asymmetric price transmission capture unequal market responses to price increases or price decreases. So I repeat that in our setting, retail prices were adjusting immediately to wholesale price increases, but more slowly to wholesale price decreases. So this is a positive asymmetric price transmission that is often due to market power or intermediaries' profit margins, and can lead to implicit welfare transfer, amplifying the negative effect for consumers of increasing retail prices while preventing to transmit potential gains when the wholesale prices decline. So in this paper, we will ask ourselves, how does the local market structure shape the transmission of staple food prices to the food security of the producing household? Then we will try to understand if asymmetric price transmission is a mechanism that reinforces the effect of locally transmitted price shock on the household food security. And finally, we will try to understand if market integration plays a role in shaping the food security to local transmitted price shocks. Looking very fast at the literature, we can see that there is a big bunch of evidences that states that food price shock reduce calorie intake, dietary diversity, and so overall food security. This effect is especially pronounced for poor and net food buyers. And this mechanism, this effect operates through many mechanisms that spans from the erosion in purchasing power, the limited substitution possibilities, and the adoption of negative coping strategies. And of course, the effect is heterogeneous depending on the market integration of the household, their market position, so if it's net buyer of food, net seller of food, and on other factors such as asset endowments. From the literature emerge three main limitations: an over-reliance also for historical factors on the 2007-2008 food crisis, while this new vulnerability presents compounding effects and supply-side shocks that were not present before, an over-reliance on the investigation of net food buyers' food security, and we quote Alam et al. 2024 that states that in the literature there is an over-reliance on cross-sectional data that limits the isolation of causal impact. So in the paper, we will use two main data sources: an FIO panel survey that is on to 2,200 smallholder farmers that are spread among 10 Sri Lankan districts and to 220 farmer organizations, and a weekly price series collected by the Hector Kubekadua Training Research Institute of Colombo, where I did my visiting period. Unfortunately, the price series, the Farmgate price series and the panel overlap for only 2 districts, preventing the use of Farmgate prices as our main explanatory variable. So we focus on retail prices instead. So this is one of the main limitations of our study. And our outcome variable is the food consumption score that, as you know, is a composite metric that asks the frequency of the consumption of food groups in the last week, weighted by the relative nutritional value of each food group. Estimating the impact of retail prices on the food security of producing farmers, of course, triggers endogeneity concern. And for this reason, we employ a shift-share Bartik instrumental variable approach, in which the shift component is the absolute value of the error correction term that captures changes in district level market integration, while the share component is each farmer organization baseline's distance to the nearest economic centers that proxies differential exposure to market shocks. It's crucial at this point to stress the fact that by using fixed effect and by leveraging the panel structure, we are not capturing the value of the error correction term per se, but changes in market integration and changes in the error correction term. This is very important because while justifying the exogeneity of the error correction term that is constructed from observed prices, changes in the error correction term are determined by external shock and are predetermined with respect to the current food consumption score shock. In the first stage of our empirical strategy, we will regress prices on the instrument, and then the instrumental price variable will be used to estimate the impact of prices on the food consumption score. We cluster standard errors at the farmer organization level. I repeat, there are 220 farmer organizations, and for the limited number of clusters, but more importantly, for the estimation error embedded in our instrument, we complement cluster inference with wild bootstrap inference. Fortunately, all our findings are confirmed by the bootstrap inference. Finally, of course, our instrument must satisfy the relevance, so district level changes in the error correction term must affect local retail prices. The interaction, the Bartik instrument must be orthogonal to the structural error term in the food security equation. And the exclusion restriction requires that the instrument influence food consumption score only via its effect on retail prices. There are many potential threats to the exclusion restriction that goes from price expectation formation, consumption-driven reverse causality, and non-food budget reallocation. However, the short span of our framework and the use of fixed effect and the inability of each smallholder farmers to influence district level price dynamics support the validity of our interpretation. Of course, using an instrument, we are isolating a local average treatment effect. So the effect of retail prices for those subset of households whose local prices are differently affected by district level market integration shifts. So looking very briefly at the descriptive statistics, you can see that the food consumption score increased from 2002 to 2023, reflecting the fact that the peak of the crisis was behind, and prices decreased slightly, maintaining a high level in 2023. Now we look at the OLS that, of course, must be interpreted with caution due to the endogeneity concern that I was speaking before. However, it offers us a first benchmark of the effect of retail prices on the food consumption score. The effect is highly statistically significant and entails that for every 1 rupee increase in retail prices, the food consumption score decreased by 0.23 points. Now, looking at the first stage regression, we can see that we have evidence supporting the relevance of the instrument. Indeed, the interaction between the absolute value of the error correction term and the distance to the economic center is positive and highly significant. Furthermore, first stage diagnostic exceed the canonical value, indicating that the instrument is strong and relevant. And most importantly, we have evidence supporting the exclusion restriction because while controlling for the instrument, we have a significant value. Once retail prices are included into the specification, the interaction become not significant. Okay, so now we can jump into the second stage regression results. The second stage results confirm the fact that retail prices have a negative effect on the food consumption score. However, the coefficient is 5 times more negative, indicating that the OLS suffer from attenuation bias. And so now for every retail price, from every rupee retail price increase, there is a 1.16 reduction in the food consumption score. However, we must also look at the absolute variation. And so this change from the OLS to the second stage could seem very large. However, we need to take into account that the mean of the food consumption score in our sample is 72. So this difference in coefficient is not so high. Furthermore, we can see that in 2023, the food consumption score improved, and that asset wealth, as we were expecting, plays a protective role against food price inflation. Now we go into the heterogeneity analysis, and we tackle the second two policy implication. Ideally, we would classify household in net buyer, net seller, self-sufficient. The second big data limitation of our study is that the panel does not have information on rice consumption. So we adopt a proxy classification, classifying no selling households, household that produce rice but does not sell, low selling household that sell 1 to 50% of their output, and high selling households that sell more than 50% of their output. The heterogeneity results indicates that market integration plays a role in the response to locally transmitted prices. Indeed, as you can see, although all the coefficients for the selling categories are negative and monotonically more negative, the only significant effect is for high selling categories. At first, this result could seem counterintuitive, because we can think of the protective role of surplus in isolating to food security. However, we need to take into account many factors. The first one is that we are isolating retail price increase, not farm gate price increase, and especially in a context of imperfect transmission, higher retail price does not necessarily translate into higher farm gate revenues. Furthermore, the household that are high selling in our sample are more specialized and rely on the market more for food consumption. And if you think it also makes sense from a statistical viewpoint, because the more integrated household in the market are the ones that are more influenced by the change in prices that is triggered by a change in the market structure. And finally, our most novel result is that in district shifting from a symmetric price transmission mechanism to an asymmetric one, we have a very strong negative effect with a 1 rupee increase in retail prices that reduce the food consumption score by 3.16 points. On the other hand, district shifting from asymmetric to symmetric price transmission has a positive and not significant effect. The latter indicates that asymmetric price transmission can pose a double burden on farmer and consumer by amplifying retail price increases while failing to pass through potential benefit when the wholesale price decrease. So concluding, our pooled effect entails a 1.6 reduction in the food consumption score. The effects are highly heterogeneous based on market integration, price transmission, and market position. And asymmetric price transmission plays a key role in shaping the food security outcome. This is a novel contribution of our study that tries to link the effect, the literature on market integration and the literature on the effect of food prices on the welfare of farmers. Our policy implication stems from this novel contribution and stress the importance of monitoring asymmetric price transmission along the value chain to conduct market studies, market power studies, surveying the miller and where the concentration is, and also monitor the market power of intermediaries along the value chain. Okay, so I thank you to everybody. Are there any? Okay.
I mean, data comes from, came from households, right?
We have two data sources, a panel survey and a price series.
Yep.
With the price series, we construct our main endogenous regressor that are retail prices and error correction terms that are estimated using a co-integration model.
Yeah, sure. But the unit of observation is the household.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if these households belong to some, I don't know, cooperative or organization, producer organization at the local level? Is there this kind of layer which may influence the pass-through transmission or not?
Not because the data are clustered using only people enrolled in farmer organizations. So there is
Okay, I missed this point.
And
Yeah.
the share component is the distance to the nearest economic center that is not the farmer organization, but where I've been there is when they give market bulletin, weather bulletin. So it's very symmetric on this
Okay,
regard.
and it's homogeneous as a population. Okay, yes. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see all the presentation, but it's very, very relevant issue. So I would like to ask if you have also information regarding Fargate prices. So if you are able to do the transmission asymmetry on the ground.
I was saying maybe you were not there. My main data limitation is that the price series and the panel overlap probably two districts for Fargate prices. I have self-reported Fargate harvest prices, but I have only 700 observation.
So you are directly linking retail prices with farmers' outcomes.
Your question is why we are using retail prices?
Yeah.
Yeah, because of course the first idea was to. However, we are looking at smallholder farmers that also consume food. Unfortunately, we don't have the possibility to classify them in net buyer, net seller because we don't have the consumption data. However, we also would like to emphasize the fact that the farming household is both a consumer. So once Fargate prices were not there, retail prices became important also because we found a very high asymmetric price transmission between wholesale and retail. So it was a second best way to try to disentangle both the consumption and the production, a food price shock. But our maybe I didn't stress it enough. Our interest is not to understand the effect of a food price shock on the food user using retail prices. The use of retail prices and our strategy is more linked to understand how this price shock prorogate due to changes in the market structure. I don't know if I answered the question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I was wondering whether you have a way from the data to identify the main market distortions and to get a little bit more at the policy to see if there are any breaks in the passing through that may come from constraints of infrastructure, from limits or barriers to coordination, or for limits or barriers to the diffusion of information?
Like, I've been there 4 months and speaking with every sector of the value chain. They all state that there is market concentration and cartel at the miller level. Unfortunately, I've been there in this research center. The last survey on millers is from 2004. In my opinion, Sri Lanka has 2 main policy implications. That the first one is try to understand whether there is market concentration and whether how much this political cartel control really in the, because the miller then are in the producing district, so all the is there. But looking at the studies that try to understand whether there is market concentration, they rely on very old data, and now the composition of the milling population is changed. So without some evidences that are not anecdotal on the market concentration, my policy implications are weaker because, of course, if there is market concentration at the milling level and is supported by political cartel, it's a very serious situation, especially because Sri Lanka invests a lot in rice, a lot of money. And one of the biggest problems on which IFPRI is working now is giving them affordable, healthy diets because there is an over-reliance on rice, both in the production, in the R&D, and in the political interests.
Thank you, Giovanni. This is a very interesting work. So let me first congratulate with you, but because I know you're co-authors, so I can just imagine how much work you have been done on the data, analyzing the data, structure it, and it's a very, very interesting work. So my congratulations to you for this. I think you will have great, let's say, publication outcomes. Hope, fingers crossed, as usual. But I have just a small question to you. So you were been talking about positioning in the market chain. I suppose it's market chain, not value chain, because you don't have the input-output table, the intermediaries. But anyhow, I mean, it's so it's, you were saying that you were controlling for positioning like net seller, net buyer position, net buyer positioning. But do you have other like factors that can give a sense of the positioning in terms of upstream, downstream in the market chain? I know it's tough to say something like that, but
no, like especially in the first chapter that is very linked to this one, we were trying to compute like intermediary margins and try to spatially map this concentration. But once again, it's due to like old data. And in my price series, I've only like imagine retail price, farm gate price. I don't have way to compute the net margins. And yeah, so no, like I computed district-wise asymmetric price transmission that I cannot explain why there is asymmetric price transmission, but I can point out that there is. This is the maximum that I
see. That totally makes sense. I mean, it's just, you know, I was just wondering, I mean, because if you do have this information,
unfortunately, like it's very frustrating also because every time that I speak with my fellow colleagues, I said, is there new data? No.
No, there's no. Thank you, Giovanni.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm also the chair, so the session is closed.